The Atlanta Braves continue to play some sloppy defenses that cost them on Tuesday night to the Diamondbacks. Plus, we'll take a look at the roster crunch for the Atlanta Braves as they look to add pitching at the trade deadline. All that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani, and you can follow me on Twitter at shortstopball. Also, make sure you check out my written work over at bravestoday.com. Make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast as we lead up to the trade deadline. You got some mock trades you want to send my way, feel free to do that, and maybe I'll discuss it on a future episode. Make sure if you're new on YouTube, you hit that subscribe button. Up over 6,200 subscribers on YouTube now. Also, make sure if you're watching there, hit that thumbs up button as well. You've been killing it on the videos lately. A lot of great comments down in the comment section. I try to get to each and every one of those, so thank you so much for being part of the show there. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Thanks so much to Greg Harris and David, who let me know on the last podcast that they are everydayers. If you are an everydayer, let me know down in the comment section below on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you can win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. On today's podcast, we're going to cover that ugly loss on Tuesday night. A lot of bad to talk to, some good, obviously, in there as well from the offensive side of things, including Austin Riley, who had a huge night at the plate. And then we're going to take a look at the pitching. Obviously, that's been the issue for the Braves for a while now. Going to take a look at the numbers for the pitching staff over the last couple of months. And then as we get closer to the trade deadline, there's a roster crunch right now for the Braves, even though pitching staff hasn't been great. It's going to be difficult to see who the Braves are going to move off this roster if they do bring in some pitching help. So we'll talk about that and then set you up for Wednesday's game, where hopefully Charlie Morton can get the Braves back in the win column. But let's start with Tuesday's game, a 16-13 loss. Just a crazy game. Talked about this on the postcast last night with Grant McCauley. You can check that out over on Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube or on the Locked On Braves podcast feed. But just a wild game. And I said it there. It was either one of those games where if the Braves won, it felt like it was going to be one of the most exciting games of the year just because of that back and forth offensive explosion. And it just, if the Braves would have come on top, you would have said, this is one of the most fun games you've seen all year long. But if it ended up the way that it did and the Braves losing and giving up 3 runs in the ninth like that, it feels like one of the most frustrating losses of the season. You score 13 runs and you don't win the game. That's just unacceptable. It cannot happen. Your pitching staff cannot give up 16 runs. I believe it was the first time I think they had given up 16 runs this year, and I believe it was the first time in a while they'd given up that many runs. I happened to be listening to the Diamondbacks broadcast at one point because MLB.TV is just terrible, but they sent me over to the Diamondbacks broadcast, and I heard them say on there it was the first time ever that the Diamondbacks gave up 12 runs in a game and still won. So a lot of history being made. There was also just a ton of teams across baseball last night that scored double digits. I think the final count was either 10 or 11 teams who scored double-digit runs last night, which obviously hasn't been done a lot in the history of the game. So I don't know what was going on Tuesday, but just a crazy night offensively across the league. But still, for the Braves, and it is a good pitching staff. We're going to talk about how they haven't been as good lately later in the episode, but it is a good pitching staff. You just can't give up 16 runs, and defense hurt them, and the defense lost this game ultimately along with the bad pitching, but you just can't give up that many runs. You can't lose a game when you score 13. As great a job as the offense did continuing to fight back and come back, to lose a game in that manner when you score 13 runs, that just makes it hurt even more. And it's another bad game from Bryce Elder. 2 2/3, 7 hits, 1 walk, 7 runs, only 5 of them earned, 4 strikeouts, and 1 home run. The home run was a solo shot. And You look at the way this game started for Bryce Elder, a bloop single. Maybe Ronald could have got to that, but it drops in a bloop single to start the game. And then Corbin Carroll bounces one over the first baseman that lands on the chalk. That right there probably should have been a sign of things to come on the night, that things just weren't going to go Bryce's way. Look, and he ended up giving up a lot of hard hit balls in this game. But that's a very unfortunate start to the game for Bryce Elder. You give up a bloop single, and then you give up a Mickey Mouse kind of hit to Corbin Carroll that bounces over the first baseman, goes down the right field line, scores a run. Corbin Carroll gets a triple out of it. That's just a really bad start right there to the game. There's an error in that inning that allowed another run. I'm going to go through all the mistakes here in a minute, but just focusing on Bryce Elder for a second. He left a sinker up, middle up to Rivera to start the second inning that went for a home run. He threw sliders middle down to Marte and Walker that got hit really hard. Again, he gave up a lot of hard hits in this game. 4 sinkers were put in play against him, all hit at 96.1 miles per hour or harder. Again, all 4 sinkers that were put in play against Bryce Elder were a hard hit ball, over 95 miles per hour. 6 sliders put in play against them had an average exit velocity of 94.8 miles per hour with a max exit velocity of 105.5. He got hit really hard in this game. He gave up a couple of bloops in there as well, but he also gave up a lot of hard contact in this one. Even so, as bad as maybe he was in this one, probably should have only allowed 3 runs through the first 3 innings, and then he probably, gets a 4th inning and maybe gets a chance to continue in this game. Defense was terrible and let him down a couple of times in a big way that led to a lot of runs. There was only 2 unearned runs charged against him. Again, you probably could have added a couple more to that with some misplays. So again, he didn't pitch great. He got hit pretty hard, but the defense wasn't helping him out either. Tough stretch for Elder here, really last 2 games. I think he'll get out of it. He's somebody that he has to live on the edges because he doesn't have overpowering, dominating type stuff. He relies on the movement and kind of living on the edge, getting hitters off balance, getting them to roll over on pitches. Hasn't done that in the last 2 starts, and you have to play good defense behind him. He did have 4 strikeouts in just the 2 2/3 innings, but typically is a guy who is going to rely on that defense, and you just wonder if he feels a little shaky about that defense, as maybe he tries to be a little bit too fine with his pitches, going for the strikeout, and then that leads to some mistakes. I don't know. Certainly something Bryce Elder has to figure out, but been a rough couple of starts here before the All-Star break and his first one after, but I do think he'll get things turned around. Pitching in general was bad. I mean, even after Bryce Elder went out, again, he gave up 7 runs, which is a lot, but the team scored 13. And the pitching staff after Bryce Elder gave up more than that and still weren't able to at least hold things down and keep the Braves in there and hold on to the lead. Tonkin was doing okay, probably tried to push him too far, sending him back out for that 6th inning where ended up giving up a big 3-run homer. Jimenez had the only full clean inning of the game. He walked the leadoff batter and he nearly gave up 2 home runs, so he wasn't necessarily great either, but he at least did have a clean inning. Yates hit Corbin Carroll, which you just cannot do because that's pretty much an automatic double. He actually ended up stealing 2nd and 3rd base. He also walked Christian Walker behind him, which with the way he was swinging, maybe that wasn't the worst of ideas, but then they had that double steal because Yates didn't try to hold the runners at all and didn't give Murphy a chance to throw anybody out. Then you also had Iglesias come in, or then Yates almost got out of it, then gave up a bloop single, and they scored that run there in the 8th inning to tie the game. Then Iglesias in the 9th inning gives up a bloop single to start, and then Olsen made a big error on what could have potentially been a double play, and then Perdomo and Marte just smoked balls off of him before he finally got lifted. There was no reason to leave him in that game after the Braves were down 3 runs. So rough night overall for the pitching. Again, we'll talk more about the pitching here in a second. But I want to focus on the mistakes. And maybe you don't want to hear about this. I apologize. I know this is a rough one to talk about, but error by RC in the first leads to a run. Michael Harris getting thrown out trying to stretch a single into a double in the bottom of the first. That gives Davies a free out in the first inning when the Braves had him on the ropes. I think that's a mistake as well. Perhaps could have been an even bigger first inning right there. With his speed, you take the single and maybe you steal second. Either way, you give the Diamondbacks a free out there. Ozzie hesitates on a ground ball by Thomas. Elder doesn't cover the bag. That's a free base runner right there. And then a wild pitch on a strikeout. And then Murphy throws the ball away. Those two plays allowed 3 more runs to score that shouldn't have. So in the first, 2 innings alone, there's 4 runs right there that the Braves gifted the Diamondbacks. Like I said, Bryce Elder could have easily gotten out of those first couple of innings, only giving up 2 or 3 runs. Soft grounder by Carroll. Either Olsen has to go home there or Elder has to shoot over to first base. I don't know if they get Corbin Carroll at first base either way, but again, there's either just tough luck or bad execution, whatever you want to call it there, leads to another run for the Diamondbacks. Olsen's error in the 9th inning leads to at least 1 extra run, possibly 3 extra runs for the Diamondbacks there. That's conservatively estimating 6 free runs given to the Diamondbacks in this game. And in a game you lost 16-13 and you handed the team 6 free runs, it's typically not going to win you a lot of games either way. But, just even more so frustrating in this one because the offense scored 13 and you essentially gave 6 runs to the other team. Not to mention the Diamondbacks made several great plays defensively that prevented the Braves from scoring even more. And I do have to give a little bit of love to Kevin Pillar, who made a couple of great catches in left field. Makes me kind of wonder and question, is there enough offense in this lineup that you just live with a defensive first left fielder like out there, like Kevin Pillar? Maybe they bring in somebody at the trade deadline, especially if Ozuna's not going to be hitting at the DH, which is a discussion we need to have here pretty soon. I just don't have time for it today, but a lot of mistakes by the Braves defensively. That's what really cost them in this game, along with, pitching wasn't great either. The offense was great. It's almost not surprising at this point. A 5-run first inning, you give up 2 runs in the top of the first, your offense comes back, gives you 5. You just kind of expect that from the Braves at this point. A big game for Austin Riley, 3 for 5, a double, 2 homers, 7 runs batted in, much needed for him. Hopefully he is lined up to have a big second half. You get him going with the way the rest of the offense has been going. And again, I said this on the postcast, I don't know what other level this Braves offense can go to, but you get Riley hitting like the MVP candidate that we all thought he could be, and I think he can be. This offense is just going to go supersonic, to steal a quote from Ben Ingram from Jorge Soler's home run in the World Series. So a great night for the offense for sure. Tough night for the pitching and defense, and that leads to a 16-13 loss. I want to talk more about the pitching staff here in a second, where they've more so been middle of the pack the last month and a half now. And as we get towards the deadline, it's going to be a roster crunch. If the Braves are going to make some moves to bring in some help pitching-wise, you got to look at who's going to get cut. You got to look at who's coming back from injury and where they're going to fit in. We'll discuss all that next. At one time or another, we all need a little financial help. That's why Dave is great. Dave can get you cash when you need a hand between paychecks and can help you build credit by setting extra cash advances on time. Dave is the banking app that's leveling the financial playing field. When you download Dave, you could get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. It's part of Dave's extra cash account. Advance the money you need with no interest and then settle up later. Download Dave today at dave.com/MLB. That's dave.com/MLB. You could get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility criteria and instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC. The Braves will try to bounce back against the Diamondbacks at 7:20 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday night after a frustrating loss on Tuesday. Catch every pitch of the Braves' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Braves. We got our stat of the day Wednesday today that I'm about to give you. Tomorrow we'll have our Through the League Thursday segment, and then Friday will be our mailbag as we, again, are approaching the trade deadline. Want to hear some more of your mock trade ideas. Be thinking about those questions for Friday's episode. Our stat of the day for this Wednesday is a 3.92 ERA. That is the Braves' total pitching staff ERA since the beginning of June 1st. And the Braves have been, winning a lot of games since then, so it hasn't been a big issue. And a lot of that's because of the offense has just been scoring a ton of runs. But the Braves pitching staff has an ERA approaching 4 over the last month and a half now. The Braves' ERA in June was 3.87. In July, it's 4.01. On the season, they have a 3.77 ERA, which is second best in all of baseball. So again, when you complain about the Braves pitching staff, you're going to hear people say they still have the best, second best ERA in baseball, the best ERA in the National League. And I get it. On a whole for the entire season, that's true. When you look at it more in a micro span over the past, like I said, month and a half now, it's really been more of a middle pack pitching staff. A lot of that has to do with injuries, I think, are finally catching up to them. Max Fried being injured, Bryce Elder maybe regressing a little bit. Spencer Strider went through a little bit of a tough stretch there. Charlie Morton have been up and down at times, and it seems like maybe he's kind of gotten things going. Jared Schuster kind of falling off. Colby Allard hasn't really worked out. Soroka's kind of been up and down. He hasn't really worked out either. The bullpen, we mentioned the injuries there and just some guys who have kind of been up and down, but pitching staff has been more middle of the pack. That 3.92 ERA if it was their season ERA, it would rank them 11th overall. So again, still not terrible, still top of the half of the league, but certainly hasn't been that best pitching staff in baseball like the overall numbers for the season would tell you, which means Braves are probably going to have to make some moves at the deadline. We've discussed that. If there are going to be any moves made, it seems likely it's going to be in the bullpen. If you look at right now, who are pitchers that you can trust? Right now on the active roster, for me, it's Strider. And I know he's coming off a little bit of a rough outing himself. It's Charlie Morton, who has had his inconsistencies, but he's been on a roll lately. I mean, that's kind of it right now on the active roster. It's Strider and Morton. Now, when Fried's back, I still think he's going to be somebody that you can trust. When Minter's back healthy, I think you add him to that list. Iglesias, I get it. It was a rough outing on Tuesday. That broke a streak of 7 straight outings without allowing an earned run. I think for the most part this year, he's been good. It's just when he's been bad, he's been really bad. It's not, he's just given up 1 run. When he's been bad, he's giving up multiple runs and, it can let a game just get away from you. That game on Tuesday, you felt like if he just limited it to 1 run, and look, again, bad defense behind him, but you limit that to 1 run, you still feel really great about the Braves' chances of at least tying it or taking the lead in the bottom of that inning. And even when they scored 3 runs with this offense, I thought, they still had a chance, but it just felt like that took all the air and whatever momentum the Braves still had there out of it going into the bottom of the 9th when you give up a 3 spot. So I put Iglesias kind of in that fringe trust territory right now. I think Elder's kind of in that fringe trust territory. Yates and Jimenez are still in that fringe trust territory for me, even though they both have a whip under 1 in the last 30 days. They've been much better, but I still don't fully trust them at this point. Tonkin may be one of the guys that I trust the most out of that bullpen, even though I know he gave up 4 runs on Tuesday. Heller, I still don't fully trust him, even though he's gotten some big innings. So these are all guys that I think you can win with, but they're not guys that I fully trust right now in a close game or in a postseason scenario. Braves just don't have a ton of pitchers. Again, guys that are coming back, Chavez, possibly Nick Anderson, Kyle Wright, Max Fried, Dylan Lee. You get those guys back and they pitch like they're capable. I think you could add, at least 3 or 4 of those guys to the list or the names of people that you do trust, along with Strider, along with Morton, Minter as well in that should be coming back. And I think the Braves have a solid group of arms, 3 starters in Strider, Morton, and Fried that you can trust. That's all you really need going into a postseason. And then Minter, hopefully Iglesias, Chavez, Dylan Lee as maybe some guys out of the bullpen that you trust. You look at the rotation and bullpen right now, and you talk about a roster crunch and the Braves adding arms at the deadline. Who are you going to let go? And looking at the rotation in the bullpen, if everybody is healthy, and this is assuming everybody is healthy and pitching the way that they're capable of, this is what the 13 pitchers for the Braves could look like. In the rotation, it's Strider, Fried, Morton, Elder, and Wright. Those are your 5 starters if everybody is healthy right now. And that's a big question with Fried and with Wright, especially with Wright. Don't really know the timetable on him. Fried hopefully could be back by the end of this month, possibly. But those are your 5 bullpen arms right there, or your 5 starting pitchers right there. In the bullpen, it's Iglesias. He's going to be there. He's not going anywhere, no matter what you think of him. And I think for the most part, like I said, he's been good. It's Minter, again, if healthy. And then it's Yates, Jimenez, Lee, Anderson, Chavez. Those are those are your bullpen arms. There's one spot left there that either goes to Tonkin or Heller right now. And I think it's a toss-up as to which guy you go with. I kind of lean Tonkin. He's just been so good in that role of bridging the gap, but Heller has that, mid to upper 90s stuff that can be kind of dominant when he controls it. So that's a tough call right there, which leads to the question, who is getting replaced? If you are acquiring arms at the deadline, who are you cutting? I don't see them cutting Yates or Jimenez, who, again, they've been better over the last month or so. Definitely not cutting Lee, although he does have minor league options. If he is slow to come back, and it's, Brian Snitker said the other day, it's taking longer than they first expected, they could keep him in AAA. He does have options remaining. Nick Anderson, I don't know the status of him coming back and what that will look like. So I wouldn't figure him into the picture right now. I would count him as a cut at the moment. Chavez, he's been great. He's going to be part of the bullpen whenever he's healthy and can come back, but he's also very slow to come back. We have no timetable on him. So I think, again, if everybody were healthy, I don't really know where you put somebody at the trade deadline when you acquire somebody. I think you have to consider Anderson's spots up for grabs right now, and you worry about that once he comes back. I think you could say the same for Dylan Lee right now, although I think, if he's healthy and he's back and he's pitching like Dylan Lee, I think he has to be part of this bullpen. And then you maybe have one other spot, again, in the spot that's held right now by Tonkin or Heller, where you can upgrade. So, again, and this is with me, I'm cutting Colin McHugh right now. He's somebody that for me goes, obviously, Elledge, who we'll talk about in a second, they just called up. That's a spot that can be replaced. Litke right now can be replaced. Derek Rodriguez right now can be replaced. But those are all guys that are going to be replaced by players coming back off injury. And then it's who are you cutting to make room for guys at the trade deadline? So, again, it's easy to say, let's just go out and trade for a Jordan Hicks or Adbert Alzolay or Josh Hader or whatever reliever you want to get. And those would all be fine upgrades over just about everybody in the bullpen. But still, you're going to have to cut somebody pretty good or somebody that you probably don't want to get rid of at this point. I know it's easy for fans to sit here and say, just get rid of Yates, get rid of Jimenez. You're tired of seeing them. I get it. But at the same time, they're paying them pretty good money. And those guys have been much better over the last month or so. And I think the Braves are counting on them. So, again, it's a roster crunch. It's going to be difficult for Alex Anthopoulos to kind of squeeze through this, especially because you have so many productive players who are injured right now, and you have to account for when, if they're coming back, and who are they going to replace on the roster once they do come back. So that makes this trade deadline, in my mind, a little bit tricky for Alex Anthopoulos because you do have so many pitchers on the injury list. You got to think about whenever they're healthy, they got to have a spot on this roster. Who are you going to kick off? And then if you're bringing in arms at the deadline, who are they going to kick out? Who are they going to replace? So, again, there's room there and there's ways to maneuver around that. Again, I think Anderson, I consider him a huge question mark at this point with his injury. Even Chavez is really slow right now. And I think you can upgrade over Tonkin or Heller. So I think there's potentially 3 spots there that could be open in the bullpen where you could go make a move at the deadline. But again, it's not going to be easy right now just because of how many guys are injured. You don't know the status of them coming back, and they're going to need roster spots when they come back. So it's not just simple as go out and get this guy, put him on the roster. You got to think about the scenarios of injured players coming back as well and what that does to the roster. But look, make no mistake about it. The whole point of this and the stat of the day Wednesday is that the pitching staff hasn't been as good over the last month and a half or so. They pitched more to a 3.9 ERA. Need to see that turn around. Obviously, injured players coming back will help. Perhaps some arms at the deadline will assist in that as well. More injury news happening, unfortunately, for the Braves on Tuesday as Sam Hilliard goes down. We'll talk about that. Also, Travis d'Arnaud being added for another year. We'll discuss that as well here next. Are you using Sleeper app for daily fantasy baseball? If not, you certainly should be. It's a really fun app. It's a fantasy sports app that combines real money as well, focused on bringing people together through sports and gaming. It's one of the fastest organically growing fantasy platforms out there. And if you want to 100 times your money in daily fantasy baseball, Sleeper is now offering up to a 100 times payout for up to 8-pick contest. All you do is you go in, you choose as many as 8 players that you like, pick more or less on baseball stats like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right, and you could win big on Sleeper. Use the promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. A little bit of news from Tuesday as well. Some big news from Tuesday as well, as Travis d'Arnaud was extended for another year at $8 million. Now, the Braves already had a team option on him for next year at $8 million. So essentially what they're doing at this point is they're just saying, we're going to pick up that option anyway. Let's go ahead and make that official and then add another team option for the following year. This makes so much sense. I know there was some kind of bogus, rumors, speculation out there about the Braves maybe trading Travis d'Arnaud. Said all along that's not going to happen. Travis d'Arnaud is here to stay. I think he's going to be a Braves organization guy for the rest of his lifetime if he wants to be. I think that's how big he is to this Braves franchise and what he's done and how great of a leader that he is. I could see him even coaching this team one day. That's how important he is in this clubhouse, and he's the best backup catcher in all of baseball behind Sean Murphy. They combined are the best catching duo in all of baseball. It makes sense just to go ahead and re-up him for next year. You get another team option year on there as well. So this just is a no-brainer in my mind to bring back Travis d'Arnaud. Forrest Wall was called up with Allard being put on the IL. I've talked about Forrest Wall a lot this year, and I've said several times on our Minors Monday when talking about him that I thought he had the shot to make the postseason roster because of his speed this year. 45 stolen bases on the season. So good to see him go ahead and get a call up now, maybe get his feet wet. We'll see if he gets into a game, which he might if the injuries keep happening in the outfield the way they are. You already have Rosario out right now. He's day-to-day. Sam Hilliard had to leave Tuesday's game with an injury. He is now on the injured list. So maybe we'll get a chance to see Forrest Wall. But again, I've said all season, I think he's a really good candidate to be that postseason pinch runner guy on the roster. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for Forrest Wall. Seth Elledge was recalled and added to the bullpen with Hilliard going on the IL. Makes sense. The Braves are going to need some arms right now. Danny Young was released as a result of that. I believe he was on the injured list already at the minor league level. So Danny Young gets the cut there with Seth Elledge being added back to the 40-man roster. So good bit of news there on Tuesday. I think the best news of all, Travis d'Arnaud officially back for next year at $8 million, which is a steal for the way that he has performed for the Braves. On Wednesday night, it'll be game 2 between the Diamondbacks and the Braves. It'll be Charlie Morton versus Ryan Nelson. Morton has been great here lately. Hopefully he can continue that trend. The Braves need him to continue that trend and pick themselves up. More so, I want to see the Braves play a clean game. I don't know if they're just kind of checked out mentally at the moment. You had the big first half. You had the all-star break where 8 guys went. You come back from the second half and just honestly haven't played clean baseball, specifically on the defensive side of things. Want to see that get turned around because the Braves, you don't want to check out too much too early here in the second half. And I'm not saying they're doing that, but could understand if that's the case with the big lead they've afforded themselves. And because the Marlins keep losing, the Braves haven't lost any ground in the NL East. So again, it's, you want to see them play better baseball, more complete baseball, play like the team they're capable of playing like. The last 7 games for Charlie Morton, last 7 starts, he's 5-0 with a 2.52 ERA and a 1.22 whip, 43 strikeouts and 39 and a third inning. So want to see that continue for Charlie Morton. The Braves need him to go deep into this game with as much of the bullpen they had to use on Tuesday night. So hopefully he's able to do that. Ryan Nelson, a 4.98 ERA on the year, just 68 strikeouts and 99 and a third innings and a 1.44 whip. His last 7 starts, he has a 4.30 ERA and a 1.35 whip with 31 strikeouts and 37 in 2/3 innings. So hopefully another chance here for the Braves offense to put up a big number. Hopefully Charlie Morton gives them some length and some really good innings, continue the role that he is on Braves get back in the win column and start playing some good baseball once again. It'll be the Braves and the Diamondbacks on Wednesday night at 7:20 p.m. Eastern at Truist Park. It'll be Charlie Morton against Ryan Nelson. Catch every pitch of the Braves' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Braves. That will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of each and every day. Make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Follow me at ShortstopBall. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.